All right, welcome back. It is NASCAR's Fast Money, and we're breaking down the Bristol playoff race for the NASCAR Cup Series. This is the final playoff race of the first round. So after this round, we're going to see four playoff drivers eliminated and not making it advancing to the next round. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch. This race is long. It is 500 laps. So what does that mean from a DFS perspective? There's going to be a ton of points up for grabs this weekend. So dominators are really important, and you want to jam in more dominators than you normally do, because if you don't have those guys who are leading those laps and picking up those fast laps, you are going to be in trouble this weekend. Laps are clicked off really fast here at Bristol. It usually only takes them 15, 16 seconds to get around the track. They're running the 750 horsepower package. They did race at Bristol earlier this year, but that was when dirt was on the track. So it's not really a relevant reference point for us to use. So you can either go back to, last year's Bristol's data, or you can kind of look at the 750 package data as a whole for this year. But I know Richmond didn't have a lot of cautions. We weren't really expecting Richmond to have cautions, but when you throw 37, I think, cars are in the field for this one, 37 cars on a half mile, high banked, fast, short track, there's going to be some wrecks. So, just kind of be aware of that. But yeah, let's get to the driver by driver breakdown, the whole reason why you guys are here. And I also just want to say thank you. All the support we've gotten this year has been awesome. If you guys want to continue to show your support, or maybe if you're new, liking the video really means a lot to us. Subscribing, that way you're not missing out on new content. Interacting with us in the comments, whether it's on YouTube, or you can even hit us up over on Twitter. It's at FastCarsFM. Post a spreadsheet there too, and potentially be adjusting the spreadsheet as we get closer to the lock of the slate. Just if our thoughts change, or if a guy gets sent to the rear, what does that mean? Kind of things like that. So like I was talking about in the race preview, dominators are really important this week. And with no practice in qualifying, we're all kind of taking an educated guess of kind of the front runners, who is really going to stand out, who is going to take that early lead, and who's going to, rack up those dominator points. So as far as like lineup construction goes, I think you want to get, at least two, a minimum of two potential dominators in your line, probably three, maybe even potentially four, depending on how crazy you really want to get, how low you want to go. But if you don't have the dominator, I mean, these guys are going to be scoring 80, 90, 100, 120 plus points. If you don't have them, you're screwed. So I'd rather would take a risk and throw more darts at the board and hope that, one of the darts that I'm throwing hits. Because if it does hit, then there's a good chance you're going to cash. So some of my and drivers in yellow are playoff drivers. Drivers in green have already advanced to the next round. That's what that means on the left. So the drivers I think can lead this race, and I'm the most confident in, would be Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson. Track history says both of these guys are going to be slam dunk plays. This is probably arguably Busch's best track that he runs at during the year. His teammates Hamlin and Truex already locked in, so I think JGR is going to be putting a lot of focus on this 18 car this weekend. He's priced as the most expensive driver as a reason, and he even gives you a little bit of place differential. Another guy that it's hard to fade is Kyle Larson. Larson has always historically run well at Bristol, even when he was in the 42 car. Now that he's in the Hendrick number 5 car, I mean, he should be even better. It should be the Kyle and Kyle show for Saturday night. But before it becomes the Kyle and Kyle show, like we are anticipating it to be, there's probably some other guys who have a good chance of leading some laps too. And I think Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr., like we just saw last week with Richmond, are in a great position to do so. Hamlin did lead a bulk of that race, but that was because Truex had that issue at the very start where he beat Hamlin to the line and had to pit. So it would have been interesting to see if it wasn't for that penalty, if the narrative would have been flipped at all. Truex was the one who did end up winning that race, but I'd argue that Hamlin had the better car, was even catching him at the end. So Hamlin runs pretty well here. Between the two of them, I'm probably a little bit more confident in Hamlin. He is just expensive. So it's, trying to get a Busch, Larson, Hamlin, and Truex, like it's going to get tough. You're probably going to need at least two of those guys, maybe even potentially three, just depending on how you want to build your line. But Chase Elliott, Logano, Ryan Blaney, Kevin Harvick, Christopher Bell, Brad Keselowski, like these are all guys who have dominator upside. So I wouldn't write them off at all. I'm actually pretty high on some of them. I feel more confident in Hamlin, Larson, and Busch in this top range than I do with Elliott and Logano, but I think those are good potential lower owned plays that have the potential to get up front. So if you want to be contrarian, I think those are good options. Not super confident in Kurt Busch being able to get out front. I think Ryan Blaney is an option you have to consider, especially for GPPs. William Byron is kind of in the danger zone right now, potentially getting eliminated from the playoffs. But one track that runs somewhat similar to Bristol is Dover, and we saw Hendrick Motorsports literally finish 1 through 4, which I don't remember even the last time that happened. So if they're able to duplicate that kind of run, Byron should be a good play. And with Larson already locked in, I would imagine that Hendrick Motorsports is going to be putting a higher emphasis on the Elliott, Byron, and Bowman car this weekend. Harvick historically always runs great at Bristol. I know he hasn't been, the same Kevin Harvick that we're used to this year, but Bristol's Bristol. If you're good at Bristol, you're good at Bristol. If you're not, it doesn't really kind of matter how your team's running this year. It's such a unique racetrack. So, and then Christopher Bell and Brad Keselowski. I mean, Keselowski historically runs good here, but this year he hasn't been that good. Christopher Bell didn't lead any laps last week at Richmond, but he racked up a ton of fast laps. That car was really fast, and he's won here before in the Xfinity Series. He has Adam Stevens as his crew chief. So it might be a little risky, plugging in potentially 3 or 4 drivers who all start within the top 10, because normally, that would be a little strange. But with the way that they're setting the field, it's all the playoff drivers are starting, 1 through 16. So of course, all the good plays are going to be, towards the front of the field. So, and if they get out front, like, it doesn't really matter where they start, because if they're just racking up those dominator points, then it doesn't matter if, where they start, because place differential really isn't that important unless they lead, 30 laps and then wreck out and finish, 32nd or something. Like, that's not going to help. But even if they don't win the race, if they can get out front at some point and still have a decent finish, like, it's going to be a good day for you. So I know it's kind of tough to distinguish between like Keselowski up to Busch, like who are the guys we should really target, but you can kind of get a general idea of the way that we are leaning based off of, the ownership or the interest levels that we have there. So yeah, basically everyone I would say is being considered except for really Kurt Busch, but I'm not eliminating him from my player pool by any means. Matt Benedetto might get an ownership bump because everybody remembers when he almost won this race in the 95 car, and then he ran into Ryan Newman, and then Denny Hamlin beat him. And, it's a moment you can't forget. But other than that, he hasn't really run that well here. And at $8,400, he's kind of expensive. I'd much rather pay down for Alex Bowman or Ross Chastain. These are two guys who have, Alex Bowman is a Hendrick Motorsports car at $8,000, and he ran really well at Dover. So I would much rather pay down for Bowman, who has dominator upside, than pay up for Matt Benedetto or even Austin Dillon, who doesn't really have that dominator upside, but maybe has a little bit more place differential baked in. Because again, if if you can nail the dominators, and if you have 4 potential dominators in your line and 2 of them hit, like that's going to be a good day for you. Whereas if you only have 2 potential dominators and you only get 1 of them right, or potentially none of them right, like you're screwed. And then that place differential isn't going to mean anything. Ross Chastain has been flying. If it wasn't for this 1 through 16 playoff drivers, he would be starting even further ahead. This team has a ton of positive momentum. Love Ross Chastain this weekend. Not too interested in Tyler Reddick just based upon where he starts. Bubba Wallace, I think, is a little pricey at $7,500, but I can understand it based upon where he starts. If you look at his finishes of late, they were in the 43 RPM car, so they weren't as good in the equipment that he's in now. But when he was in that 43 car, his finishes were decent. So he's just a pure place differential play. And if you're playing those studs, kind of from, I would say, Bowman, Keselowski, Bell, Harvick, all the way up to Larson, you're going to have to find some value on the slate. You're going to have to find some place differential. It might be tough to get Wallace in there, just depending on how many of those top plays you guys want. Almirola, not too confident in him being able to get out front and lead, but he is pretty cheap for a playoff driver, so I think you should still consider him. Stenhouse historically runs pretty well at Bristol, even though he kind of has a reputation for wrecking. You would imagine that Bristol, a track that usually has a lot of cautions, that Stenhouse would be involved in a lot of those, but historically speaking, he hasn't. So watch, I probably just cursed him and he'll, wreck this weekend. But I'm interested in Stenhouse. He usually runs pretty well on these deeper bank tracks too. Newman, you never know what you're going to get. I'd much rather probably bump him down the low. I'd much rather just pay down for Chris Buescher and literally the same equipment, starting 1 position behind him for cheaper. Cole Custer has been absolutely terrible this year. Suarez usually runs pretty well at Bristol, but that was when he was with Joe Gibbs Racing and then Stuart Haas Racing. Now that he's at Trackhouse, that equipment isn't as good as JGR and SHR, but it's a lot better than what he's been in previously, at least, the last year or two. So I don't mind it. I think he's a good GPP option. Not too interested in Jones or Briscoe there. I don't mind Ryan Preece. Like I said, I like Stenhouse, but if you can't get all the way up to Stenhouse, Ryan Preece is a nice discount, even starting further back. He's looking for a ride next year, so he's really trying to make the most of these cup opportunities that he has left. And his background is kind of these more short track, type of races. David Starr is $5,800. I don't understand that one at all. He starts 38th. He should probably finish 38th unless other guys wreck out and he's able to stay on the track. But I don't even know what the over-under would be before either Hamlin or Truex laps David Starr. It's probably like maybe 10 laps, if that. Corey LaJoie burned a ton of people last week, including, myself and the rest of us here, but that doesn't scare me. I think if anything, maybe that would lower his ownership for this week, because maybe people still have that sour taste in their mouths, but $5,600 starting 31st. I still feel good about playing LaJoie. Is probably my most confident punt play. Other than that, I'm really not too crazy about McDowell or Alfredo or even Haley or McLeod or Bilicki or Huff, but there's really only a couple times, or I would say maybe a handful of times throughout the year, where you can consider these ugly punt plays. And that would usually be the super speedways, so Daytona and Talladega, and then the small short tracks with a lot of chaos, like a Martinsville or a Bristol. So I wouldn't jam in a lot of them, but I wouldn't rule them out of your player pool either. JJ Yaley's in the 51 Rick Ware Racing car. He starts 35th. Again, he's going to go laps down, but if he can just stay on the track, avoid the wrecks, and just clock laps, like guys are going to wreck out. And if he starts 35th, maybe he can get you a 26th place finish, a 27th place finish. That's going to be a good day for you. And with those salary savings, it then allows you to take a couple of more risks with those potential dominator plays And if you hit those dominators and they are earning all those dominator points, it doesn't really matter, who your punt play is. If Yaley scores 18 points and then you pay all the way up for Chase Briscoe, who scores 22 points, like that's a big price difference between Chase Briscoe and JJ Yaley. Maybe that $1,000 allows you to go from, an Austin Dillon up to a Kevin Harvick. And maybe Kevin Harvick is going to get out front and lead you those laps. Like, I would much rather pay down for an ugly punt play who I know can't lose me any points, especially if it allows me to upgrade maybe a mid-tier driver into a potential lap leader. So who are the ugly punt plays I think you should consider? Again, I would still play a LaJoie over all these guys, but if you need an ugly punt play, or if you think it's going to allow you to earn, a lot of points through dominator points, I think Yaley, Davison, and Smithley can be considered just based upon where they start. Maybe McLeod and Haley. McLeod, ironically, has not DNF'd at all this year. So Bristol should be a tough track to continue that track with, just all the chaos is probably going to be on it, but he's arguably the safest. I would just prefer the price savings with Davison or Smithley starting 36th or 37th, or even Yaley, just because I feel more confident as Yaley as a driver. So don't rule out some of those ugly punt plays. But Bristol is, like I said, it's unique. It's a little different. It just kind of comes down to, can you get those dominators right? And for me, I'd rather take more risks and have potentially 3 or 4 potential dominators in my line than trying to get it 100% right with maybe only a 2 dominator build, and just hope and pray that, that's the optimal. So that'll do it for the Cup Series at Bristol. If this was helpful in any way, like I said, liking, subscribing means a lot to us. Any questions, drop them in the comments below. But other than that, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, Xfinity videos up if the Xfinity race has not already happened, and best of luck.